Welcome to Pastoring in the Digital Parish, your resource and point of connection for building your digital ministry toolkit and bringing your congregation into the digital age. Glad to have you back with us. My name is Ryan Dunn. In this session, we'll discuss the Google Ads grant for churches and work towards unlocking its incredible potential for your ministry. Our adjunct professor for this is Reverend Jen Swindell. She dives deep into the technical necessities of how to get set up, from setting up a secure website to adhering to Google's policies around analytics integration. We discuss the art of crafting groups that cut through the noise, with Jen really emphasizing the importance of specificity and relevance, whether it's for an Easter service or a community-centered Blue Christmas event. You'll hear about her hands-on tips for creating engaging landing pages, using AI to captivate audiences, and the do's and don'ts of digital outreach. Jen Swindell is the pastor of Evangelism and Communications at North Raleigh United Methodist Church. She also coaches and consults churches in regards to their digital outreach strategies. Her goal really is to help leaders make the time they already spend in social count more and have a measurable impact in their major goals and metrics. So let's unlock the power of Google and put it to work for your ministry. All right, here we go. Here's Jen. Jen, first things first, thanks so much for joining us on Pastoring in the Digital Parish. How goes it with your soul today?
We are doing good. Beautiful day here in North Carolina.
Cool. Well, we're going to start at kind of a base level because really that's my level of understanding right now. So I have heard of the Google Ads grant for churches. I know that in some way, shape, or form, churches can get like $10,000 in advertising from Google. But beyond that, and beyond taking the first steps, I'm not really sure what's going on. So give us the base level view. What is the Google Ads grant? How does it work?
Yeah, so the Google Ads grant is available for any nonprofit, 501c3 registered, and that is going to give them, the easy way to say it is $10,000 per month. It is technically $330 something per day. It does reset daily for you, but it's a lot easier to just round that on up. Again, you are eligible whether you are individually a nonprofit or if you're part of an umbrella nonprofit. So both of those are ways to work. And all you have to do to apply for it is go to google.com/nonprofits. If you already utilize Google Workspace, Gmail for your nonprofit's domain email, you actually probably already have Google for Nonprofits, unless you're paying for that. So it's just a different module that you activate on that nonprofit's page. And so it's takes a couple of weeks to get it approved. You scan in the paperwork, do that kind of thing, answer some questions. They have a little bit of video sort of baseline knowledge for you that you've got to pass a few Google Forms tests on, and then it is yours and you're unlocked.
Okay. Have you heard churches run into roadblocks into getting started in any way? For example, ours has passed through, our identity in Google has passed through a number of different people. So tracking down like all the necessary permissions takes a little time. Are there?
Yeah, there's a lot of places you can get a roadblock. One is some states, depending on what you can be a church who can take donations, but you aren't actually an official nonprofit. So depending on your church, again, I come from a United Methodist background. So for us, we need that umbrella ruling letter as United Methodist, but we need the letter saying that we are in fact an official United Methodist church. Sometimes in church planting, that can get a little wonky because you're actually connected to kind of an anchor church potentially. And so in that case, you are kind of sharing a Google Nonprofits, which makes things a little bit more challenging, but both of you can send and use Google Ads. I've done that with churches. So that's a little bit of a roadblock. You sort of alluded the biggest roadblock or the best gift you can give is when you get Google for Nonprofits, make sure more than one person has that admin access, because if you have, for whatever reason, left the church, or even if that email goes defunct for whatever reason, it takes a mid-sized miracle to get the custody back from Google. So making sure that we pass on our digital footprint, much like you used to pass on a binder when you change jobs. Passing on your Google Nonprofits is important, or making sure you don't want 50 people to have access, but having more than one is always a good on as well. So again, knowing that you're a nonprofit, getting through that and figuring out who owns your nonprofit. Again, if you do use it for your domain email, the hardest part is it's usually not your church domain that owns it because you didn't have an email on that church domain yet. So it's a little tricky. A lot of times it's been a personal email address of a tech-oriented layperson or even a pastor or a staff person a few people behind.
Yeah, and sometimes you can look at that email and you'd be like, I see who is behind this, but I don't know who that person is, right? You know, it could be like 7 or 8 years old, and if it was a layperson who moved on long ago, yeah. So, and that's probably just a general practice that we need to keep aware of within the digital ministry world with all of our logins, whether that be to like Instagram or Google or whatever, like having
at least knowing who owns it. Again, good security practice, don't put the username and the password, but I call it my like communications magic sheet, and it has all of our usernames or URLs, and then if there's different emails, I have which of our emails, because we have communications at or creative at, so that we know who owns it. Because it's great for me when I forget, because there's too much going on, but it's also important for whenever we do pass on or multiply or add staff or move on or, change leadership, we've got to know who is where with what.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to the Google Ads grants. How have you started to see, or what are some examples of how churches use this, in a sense, gift?
Yeah, so it's an amazing gift. It really is. Like you said, it's a gift. It, obviously has probably some tax benefits for Google's business, but it has huge benefits for churches. And the biggest benefit, the biggest, most successful parts of Google Ads tend to be for more outreach-oriented kind of events. So trunk or treats do amazing. Easter egg hunts do fantastic. Even Christmas and Easter themselves do well, because the biggest thing with Google Ads is Google is providing these ads when people are searching for things that these ads are the answer to. So unfortunately, as we know, especially with more creative digital type pastor folks, not as many people search for 11 a.m. worship near me as might search for fun things to do with my kids this weekend. So we've got to be a little bit creative about what we think through with the Google ad and how we decide what to put on there and kind of just what our expectations are. I do run ads for worship, and we do get folks that do that, but the number of folks that search for worship near me is exponentially smaller than the number of folks that are searching for fall festival or trunk or treat or family Christmas Eve or breakfast with Santa. All of those things are things that will perform a lot quicker and higher than, again, we've had some folks that are like, I have this great like theodicy content page and it's a great blog. There's not as many people searching for theodicy in your geographical area that will help.
Sadly,
it is. It's sad.
Well, so it sounds like to get the ball rolling on something like this, is it almost kind of an event-based style of advertising, or what might be the platform that you recommend starting from?
Yeah, so I always love to start every church with kind of like, I call it kind of my big couple, right? So church near me, there's always folks that are going to be new here and they're searching for church near me. And then also like, what's unique about your church? But again, not super, super niche unique, because normal folks, most folks don't search for the difference between United Methodist and Presbyterian. They don't know the difference. They're looking for a church. So making sure, and again, you can add as much as you can. So I think this is a good time to say, many of us working in the digital space are used to perfecting the best copy. We choose the one thing, right? Because if I am paying for a Facebook ad, I've researched what is going to convert. I have one wording. I control all of the wording. I put it in there, and it is that one perfect thing. My analogy is it's like the fancy plate at the nice restaurant. There's only one version of it, right? With Google, as a comparison, it's kind of like you're just going grocery shopping for the entire Cheesecake Factory menu, right? You need a lot of things in the kitchen. The more things you've got in the kitchen, the more is going to get served up. But the challenge for those of us who are used to having more creative control is Google picks them. So when you make a Google ad, you actually put in kind of an unlimited number of keywords. You do want them to be relevant and as specific as possible. Then for each ad group, which is kind of like a topic. So again, I have an ad group on the Easter egg hunt, and I have an ad group on Easter worship, because
Hmm.
both of those are good and they're similar, and some of them might have the same keywords, but we want to have, again, if especially for egg hunts on a different day, egg hunt's going to have different information and all of that as opposed to worship and different keywords. Because if you're not having an egg hunt, don't send them to worship. That's a little clickbaity. We don't want to be clickbaity. We want to
Hmm.
enjoy, but you get to put 15 different options and Google picks 3 of them. You put in 4 different options and Google picks 1 or 2 of them based on what they know about the person searching and based on what's performing well. So the nice thing about it is it's a little less pressure than a Facebook ad, because you're just stocking the pantry. And there are plenty of resources out there on some best practices, and we can even get into some of that maybe. But the freedom is it's not our dollars, unlike
Hmm.
we are paying for an ad. So make a bunch of different ad groups. Again, even when I've worked with colleagues, I'll do my setup and then they'll do theirs for fun. And sometimes theirs performs really well. And it's fun to see folks that do think creatively and outside of the box and what folks are searching for. But again, back to what we put in, because I wanted to explain that, because you can put in as much as you want. I currently have, 20, 30 ad groups, and just keep going. And you can pause it after the event happens. But some things that I always have going is kind of a church near me that goes to my homepage. If you have a good kids or youth ministry, there are always, especially parents, looking for things to do with my kids, things to do with my youth, things for teens to do. So have those sorts of words going to your youth ministry page or your kids ministry page. There are a lot of folks that are searching for classes or small groups. So things like finding Christian community near me, going to a groups page, Sunday school
Okay.
classes, small groups, whatever that looks like is great. And then again, always whatever kind of big worship is coming up is also really great. Ash Wednesday, like what is Lent? We made a whole page for Lent and wrote on like, why do we do Lent? What is Lent? That had a lot of interest. And we actually had some first time visitors at Ash Wednesday, which was not anticipated, but it was something that folks were already searching for, because they're going, what is this Ash Wednesday? What is Lent? And if you can provide answers to that and provide an invite to church, it ends up turning out really well.
Okay. All right. So I'm starting to see this in practice then. So to lay it through, somebody enters into Google, Easter Sunday service near me. And because you have set up these AdWords, then the Holy Church of Jen Swindell pops up first
That's
in
scary, but
in
yeah.
their feed. Right. Okay. And then you may have that search then linked towards your church's worship page. Is that correct?
Yeah, or even better, if it is Easter,
Mhm.
having go to an Easter page is really good, because
Okay.
we've all done this where we search for something, it looks really good, maybe it is an ad or maybe it's not, and then you read it and you're like, wait, this isn't what I was looking for. And
Yeah.
then you hit back. That's a bounce. We don't like that. And it didn't get the person to come to the church, right? So you want your ad groups and your ads to be as specific as possible. So again, worship services near me might go to a normal general worship page, especially if you're like, hey, we've got contemporary and blended and whatever we've got. But if it's an Easter service near me, I would try to put them to an Easter page if at all possible. Or at least, you can even kind of, if you don't have as many pages or can't do as many pages, maybe if you can use an anchor and send them to an Easter
Okay.
section
Yeah.
of your page is also really helpful.
Okay. So in some cases, you're building specialized landing pages, but not in all cases.
Yeah, again, it really depends on what your capacity is.
Hmm.
All of this does run off of content, and for, our folks that are preaching, sermon series pages can do really
Hmm.
well if they're topical. Things like, especially around New Year's, if you're looking at goals with God or goals with grace or something like that, building out a whole landing page, putting those sermons, again, we've been talking about AI a lot, using AI to give a little 300-word summary of that sermon to give some content so folks can get to know you and get to know that. That's a great on-ramp for people if they're already searching like New Year's resolutions and you have a sermon series on how to set goals with grace or goals with God. anything is on the table. It's really just a matter of, what are people searching for that we're already doing as a church that is worthwhile? So many churches
Mm.
say we have such great stuff. It's just nobody knows about it. We're our
Yeah.
own best kept secret. And Google
I've
ads.
used those exact words many a time. Yep.
Yep. And Google ads are what help us not be our own best kept secret. But we have to
Mm.
be able to have a place and be able to know what it is. Our grief counseling does a really good thing. Now, again, Google Ads does have some rules about using the words counseling. There are some restrictions on 12-step programs that require some extra checking just because of the vulnerability and those sorts of things. But things, if you have like a Stephen ministry or a grief class, if you don't use the word counseling, class would work
Mm.
really well. That's huge. Blue Christmas worship services, when you have keywords for things like, how do I have Christmas without my mom? What does it mean to be grieving this Christmas? And then you're able to provide light and life to folks who are searching for these things.
Yeah. Well, you've worked with some other churches on this stuff. Have there been some keywords or key search phrases that have been big hits that have kind of surprised you?
The Blue Christmas was a
That
definite big
was, yeah. Okay.
surprise. That was one of those where, Christmas concerts always do really well and Christmas Eve do really
Mm.
well. And, this church was like, we really want to promote this. And I was like, okay, like, if people are searching for Blue Christmas, a lot of times they're looking for Elvis, not worship. And so,
Right.
but I had to think, and again, there's some prayer and thought that goes into this of what is Blue Christmas for? And it's for the grieving person. And, I know what it's like to go, again, like, how am I going to do the first Christmas after my mom passed? And so that's where I sort of went to and sort of praying and figuring out keywords and typing those in. And again, I was so surprised that we ended up having first time visitors at Blue Christmas because that's not what you think, but we were ready for it, working with a church, and it was beautiful. And we had Stephen ministers there, which is kind of our church's kind of listening partners, not counseling, but, sort of just walking with someone through those valleys. And it was beautiful. And so those are places that are really exciting to have. The other thing, probably one of the cooler ones that I've done is a church did a kind of outreach event called the Dog Days of Summer. Everybody should do it. Really cool. They had, we know, again, they had sort of been working with the grant. They knew, hey, like, what are people searching? And so partnered with some local dog rescues
Ah,
and a hot dog food truck. And they had some bounce houses and fun stuff for the kids. But the whole thing was a free indoor activity for families in July.
okay.
Because
That is
as
an
parents
excellent idea.
you are like, friends, we can only go to the zoo so many times. Not all of us can go to the beach every weekend, and it is too hot to be, wherever. And so thinking about and it helps because when you get into a Google Grant mindset, you're also in a really like community engagement mindset, right? You're
Mhm.
trying to take off your churchy hat and say, what are normal people searching for? But also, what do they want? What can we provide as a church to our community? Because that's what it pushes you to think like.
Yeah. Oh,
And so
that's cool.
that the Dog Days of Summer event was a really cool one that we were able to do, and be able to engage with folks. And again, through the ad grant, one other really important part is the ad grant just gets people to your website. Then it's
Mm-hmm.
your website's job to do its job to get people to the event. So sharing it really well, having a way for them to kind of plan their visit or RSVP so you can get their contact info, send them a reminder, send them follow up. That's all kind of the next steps there. But again, thinking big about how can we be invitational? Where can we be? How can we go?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that through this grant, we get like 300 something dollars a day. Now, if you have two eyeballs or two sets of eyeballs set upon your content through that day, that means you're not using the $300, right? You're just kind of charged in a sense for the effectiveness of your ad. And then you control the effectiveness. So do you have some recommended best practices for really maximizing, like, how am I going to get the $300 every day instead of just spending $1.50?
Yeah, well, I think it's a balance, right? So there are so many places that will help you run ads for churches. You can pay agencies to run them for you.
Hmm.
But some questions to ask or things to think about is, and it's different. If you're a fully online place, then you can actually run your ads anywhere folks speak the language that you're producing in. So
Hmm.
that opens it up, and you're a lot more likely to spend the full ad because your search volume is bigger. So one of the things when you set up campaigns, as you go through setting up, the first thing you'll do is set up a campaign. A campaign is kind of like the big umbrella that all those little ad groups I talked about kind of live under. The campaign has a search radius. Now, again, those of us that are used to doing Facebook ads, in Raleigh, you don't run a Facebook ad with a bigger radius than 10, maybe 15 miles because nobody's driving more
Hmm.
than 10 or 15 miles to come to my event. And if I'm advertising for someone an hour away, I'm wasting my church's tithe dollars on that ad.
Hmm.
Google's a little different, and it makes some churches a little nervous because especially when you start, you need a bigger search volume for Google to kind of decide that you know what you're doing at some point. Again, as we know, Google does not have any of their stuff public, and all of this is sort of conjecture and trends that I've seen. But you'll start with a radius that's larger than what would probably be realistic, especially if you're in a larger city. And that is to sort of get more people searching, even if it means they might not come. So again, I think for me, it's less important to spend all $10,000 than it is to make sure that we're within a reasonable ability to have
Hmm.
someone come to
Okay.
our church if we're a brick and mortar church, right? Again, if
Yeah.
you're not, then you have a little bit more freedom and you probably will have more effectiveness in that. But for us, I run ads for us tending to be closer to the 40 to 70 mile radius, which again, most folks won't drive for, but it helps. And then the more ads you put in there, the more chances you have to spend money, right? Because
Okay.
again, you're stocking a pantry. If I have salmon in the pantry, but nobody ordered salmon, salmon doesn't get served tonight, right?
Hmm.
So again, if I have my ads in there, but nobody searched for traditional worship near me today, that ad didn't get served. So it's the other reason that, some folks are like, oh no, I forgot to pause my ads. I was like, well, no one was searching for trunk or treat in December. So it's okay,
Hmm.
right? You still want to pause them just in case, but it's a process. And again, it's very much an art, not a science, but you just have to think through how many things, because again, it's hard to get the full ad spend, and churches get discouraged by that. But again, if you're seeing new visitors or if you're seeing that people are clicking on it, be excited about that. Be curious about why that is and see where else you can grow that and be able to continue to do that would be my advice.
Okay. So even still, then you can still put your "What is Theodicy" ad in the pantry, and it's not really going to cost you a whole much of anything,
And it
right?
doesn't hurt.
Because
I will say,
yeah,
fun fact, I taught a Christian journaling class. And so we did a Google ad. Guess how many people searched Christian journaling? We had it run for like a month. We had 5.
yeah,
But one of them came and it was
yeah.
really cool. And it was a couple that came. And then the next week they brought another couple. So again, it didn't hurt anything. I knew it wasn't going to, Christian journaling was not in the top 10 searches, it just wasn't.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we go where, Google Ads, if your goal is $10,000 a month, then you're looking for the 99, right? You're looking for the
Hmm.
big events. That's where it's going to
Yeah.
be. But sometimes you get the one and you're like, this is the weirdest thing, but it was beautiful and it was exactly what that person was searching for. And so I think there's value to it. And again, it's really what is your workflow? If you've got a preacher who likes to write, blogs, each individual blog post could be its own ad set if you wanted it to be. And then it's evergreen. And every time, we spend so much time working on sermons and content. And if you put them on a sermon series page or on a sermons archive page, then it's there and it can
Hmm.
be an on ramp for people for a long time. And that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, your analogy there of searching for the one over the 99, that's so pastorally. So I have to ask, as you are a pastor, how did you get into all this Google Ads stuff?
Yeah. So Honestly, originally it was the church that I was serving decided to like take a chance on having at the time Church Marketing University, then it was Church Fuel to run our Google Ads, and I just kind of fell in love with it. Like I
Hmm.
really I have been more of a tech communications pastor. My undergrad background was theater. I taught elementary school theater, but in seminary, one of my focuses was really on the fact that churches and technology had a really pretty wide divide. And so that's been kind of my passion in working in communications ministry. And so it was really a matter of finding that. And then, I was so into the Google Ads stuff while working with them that it just sort of became a thing. I actually helped them with some of their Google Ads stuff for a while as well. And so it was a great time to just really learn and be able to do it. And then I was like, how do people not know about this? I had been working in
Hmm.
churches for 10 years and I had barely, kind of like you said, I was like, maybe once or twice I heard someone say it existed, but I had never heard of people actually using it. And then once I actually saw it and realized, again, is it easy to get a full $10,000 every month? No, but it's also not necessary.
Yeah.
And so then I was able to, have a couple of friends. I have a friend rural Eastern North Carolina and set up some ads for their church. And even, without doing a whole lot of maintenance, they're still getting some visitors. Again, it's, more like $2,000 a month of Google's ad, but that's getting about 100 new people to their website every time. And that's beautiful. And it's without a lot of upkeep. Again, some people are probably listening to this and being like, that's a lot of words. That's a lot of writing ads. If you did this every sermon every week, it would be a lot.
Hmm.
But if you set up those 5 things I mentioned and you just kind of let it go, again, Google does change their policies. You do need to be attentive if they email you because you can lose the ad grant. I think that's an important thing to go ahead and say. If you violate policies, and some of their policies are quirky. For
Hmm.
instance, there was an issue with All Saints United Methodist Church. The word saints was considered trademarked related to a football team, and so we
Oh.
had to get that. We
Hmm.
had to push back and get Google to say, okay, you may use the word saints for this church. Things like caps lock, you're not allowed to put all caps for some words. So some churches that use that in their branding
Hmm.
can't use that in their Google ads. But again, we have to, it is Google's money and it's Google's rules. And if we follow the rules, there's some beautiful things with it. And again, on our website, you can still use your caps or whatever you need to do for your branding guidelines. But being attentive to the emails that Google sends is highly important if you're using the ad grant because it can get you either your account shut down temporarily or even permanently, depending on what the issue is. So if you're jumping into the ad grant, please do make sure that someone is monitoring it. That goes into the sharing admin or making sure in a transition that it's a priority. Because if you keep it going, it's a gift that continues to give to your church after, again, some hours of setup, but it can keep
Yeah.
going. But if you don't pay attention to those warnings and they need, proof of your nonprofit status for renewal and you don't give it, then you lose that. So we just wanted to make sure we mentioned that in here as well.
Yeah. Well, now that you've attended to the initial setup, how much time each week do you think you spend on it?
I mean, if there's nothing new that I'm posting, the only reason I have to go to my ads dashboard is if I'm curious how an ad is doing.
Hmm.
Or again, Google raises their hand and sends some emails about some changes. It is important that you have Google Analytics on your website. That
Okay.
allows Google to sort of track the effectiveness of the ads, and you have to sync those up in the setup process. But in most web builders, adding analytics is a pretty quick thing to do. And then you just hit under settings, link to ads, and the same person with the same email address has to do that. So again, depending on what your shared, staff structure is, might need to add some admins and get that linked over. But again, once you've got analytics there and you've got it rolling, it really does keep going. Now it's good to kind of, I sort of have it on my list at least once a month to think, hey, is there anything else we need to do ads for? Is there anything else out there or coming? And that's sort of a good framework, or just put it in your workflow of if you create a new landing page or a new event or a new sermon series, again, is this something people will search for, because you don't have to do one for everything. Again, it's easy to get overwhelmed with Google Ads. There is a lot of options. It could be an 8-hour a week thing, because again, if you were editing the sermon and writing up a page for it and then putting ads in, that could be significant, plus whatever your youth are doing and whatever your kids are doing and whatever small groups or classes you have. But also, again, for a smaller scale church, maybe lesser staff, if you just get those going, once it's going, again, if it could be 2 hours a year, just making sure nothing's broken and seeing what's happening. And again, unpausing your Christmas ads in October when your Christmas stuff's updated, and then pausing them and unpausing your Easter ads at Lent. And then same with trunk or treat or whatever if you have some of those seasonal things, turning them on and off appropriately. And that's really making sure, again, I don't use dates in my content. Some people do, like saying, hey, this year it's Sunday, March 31st, and you have to change that content. I don't like to have to check back. So I just say for Easter Sunday. And then I know if you click it, like when I'll update our website for it, but I don't have, that way I don't have to go in to the core of the ads and like edit the words of the ad. I just edit the page, because it can just always be for Easter or for the egg hunt without, they can click here for the date.
Okay. So in the initial startup, if we're developing a checklist, it sounds like you need to have access of your church's Google identity. You need to have Google Analytics linked to your website, correct?
Yes.
And then really you just need some well-defined destinations for the ads to lead through to. Is that?
Yep, those are the big ones. Your website does have to be complete. It does have to have a security certificate. It can't have like coming soon or broken links. That's another place churches sometimes get hung up in getting the grant, is they won't get approved from their website. It doesn't mean you need to go spend a $5,000 website redo with a fancy designer. It just means, again, no broken links, no broken images, no words of coming soon or to be determined. They'll sort of scan your website for those things.
Okay.
And so as long as you have kind of a healthy website, then that part's a lot easier. You do have to own your domain. So some people might utilize like a subdomain, or if they haven't purchased a domain or they're using another web builder where it's, jenswindell.wix or .word, you can't be a subdomain. You have to have your whole actual URL. So that's another thing that for some churches might be a tweak that needs to happen before they can move forward with the grant.
Okay. Does a friendly URL work for that?
I think as long as you can still have the like /Easter, because you have to, every page has to be on the domain. So you would have to mount it with you have to have the sub pages, or you could just start with just your one main one. Would be an option.
A dedicated landing page in that case. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Google won't let you redirect. That's the other thing for like sermons online. Some churches that utilize things like Church Online, and that's where they send them, or YouTube, that's where they send them. You can't do an ad to your YouTube page or to your Church Online page. You have to do it to something on yourdomain.org. So whether that's using an embed code to get your YouTube pulled over, you just have to be creative, because it is only to the domain that belongs to your nonprofit.
All right. We're going to see a bunch of churches start to take over Google here. This is going to be exciting. Do you have any final thoughts or encouragement that you'd like to share with churches who are considering digital outreach?
I think, again, just understanding the power of being able to reach out to folks and like invite them back into church. I've had some beautiful stories of folks that, were able to learn to retrust the church, in part because they discovered some of these outreach events from a Google ad. And so I think that's really important. I think, again, if you have the money and want to hire folks to do it, that's a possibility. But I think part of why I was excited to be on here is to sort of say it's worth a shot as long as you follow directions. And, again, you can get it hurt, but you have to, if you pay attention, it's free. It's worth a shot. And it is.
There's no penalty for trying it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no penalty for trying. And When you start seeing that folks have actually come to your site from it, and folks say, "Hey, I found you on Google," that's a beautiful thing. And to know that you're able to invite more folks is just really great. And again, building those relationships with folks, especially when you get into the things like grief or even Christian journaling. Like, it was really cool to know that they found us through the ad, and they really enjoyed it, and it was a practice that they get to take with them. And I just think all of that's really good, but just knowing it's step by step. Google does, it's really straightforward. You just have to go one thing at a time. But the other thing is just make sure you have a big enough search radius and that you put enough stuff in that pantry. And again, have fun with it. Like, it's open, it's free. It's a resource that a lot of churches aren't utilizing. And so I think that's worth a shot. And to get more of the churches out there, I think is great, especially when it's using Google's money to do it.
Totally. Do you have any recommended resources for people to learn more about this?
Yeah, so Google itself actually has a actual course that you can go through for Google Ads for nonprofits, which is great. There's a lot of free blogs out there and things like that. Again, Church Fuel has some really good, hey, do I qualify? What do I need to think about? So that's a great resource that's already out there as well.
Cool. Well, Jen, happy Friday. Thank you so much for giving time to us.
Yeah, I was excited, and good luck.
Cool. Alrighty. Do you have the stuff you need to unlock the power of Google? Let's get talking about it on the Pastoring in the Digital Parish Facebook group. I'd love to hear your successes and the best practices that you've come across. If you want a good follow-up to this episode, then check out an episode that I did with Caleb Lines called How Social Media Transformed a Fading Congregation. It's got some more great outreach ideas. Also, I feel like digital ministry for small and rural churches might connect here pretty well as well. There are plenty of more episodes to explore at resourceumc.org/digitalparish. And as you know, resourceumc.org is your destination for resources and tips for leading across the United Methodist Connection. My name is Ryan Dunn. I've had a lot of fun, and I'll be back with you in a new episode of Pastoring in the Digital Parish next week. Chat at you then. Peace.